Hi, and welcome to the Property Mentors podcast, where we review what's happened in a particular episode and find out actually what the person who we were giving advice to went on to actually do. We're also delighted that we've got Scott Marshall from Roma Finance with us, who are a specialist financial lender, and he will put his spin on what he thinks about the deals which we did or offered to Sally in this case when we met her initially. So, Sally, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
How are you? So let's just go back to when we met and the things that were going on in your world. An amazing property that you were working on, and two projects which we introduced you to. One really good one, because I introduced it. One slightly dubious one, because Nick brought it to the table.
It's all about the money.
It was rubbish, remember? But anyway, we'll remind you about what they were like in a minute. But looking back on that experience, how was it?
We had a great day, actually. Very different, though. Your styles are very different. I think is the polite way of saying it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what do you think about the vehicle we brought you around in? Have you recovered? How's your back?
I'm still seeing a chiropractor, actually. Yeah. But no, we're fine.
Right. Okay.
Boys and their toys, right?
Absolutely.
Didn't break down for once, anyway.
No.
So we met you in a rather fantastic Victorian dance studio in Oxford, isn't it? So, and this was a bit of a passion for you, wasn't it? And I could sense that we were going to have a job and a half to try and drag you kicking and screaming away from what you had in mind. But you might want to just talk through that and talk to Scott maybe about why you were, before we tried to shift things around in your mind, so keen on that project.
It is a beautiful building. It's stunning. It's a landmark building in my area, Hemel Hempstead. Everybody knows it. Everyone has an attachment to it. A Victorian building built back in 1889. I ran it as a performing arts, mixed-use wedding venue. We used to host all sorts of events there. It was a real hub, actually, of our community. But it was, the decor of it was quite extraordinary and not what you'd expect, I suppose, from a performing arts school. So it was lovely. It was split over 2 floors, huge, great big ballroom, lovely vistas over the cricket ground and the Grand Union Canal. But we had all the great links to the M1, A41, M25. So it's well located. And it was a labour of love. That was my life's work.
So you'd run it. So sorry, Martha. So you'd run it as a dance studio, performing arts studio, ran classes, people coming, and had you shut that business down?
I did, because what happened was, it was in a beautiful location, but sadly, residents got closer to us. And what happens, there is always an issue when you've got residential properties next to a commercial. And we was a licensed venue. So we did have issues with neighbours. And it was no longer viable being in a commercial building, which was terrible, really, because it was always there.
Yeah.
But this is quite a common problem in the UK. We know this. People moving next door to pubs and then they shut them down because they don't like the noise and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So, so that was that. So I then pursued with a real heavy heart the planning process. But that took a good 4 years.
Yes, I'm sure.
Ended up going to the inspectorate.
Okay.
So then we compromised and we got 6 apartments. However, the apartments were designed to ensure that the integrity of the building was kept as it should be. So yes, the facade, which was stunning, was to be retained. All the lovely features that had been covered up over the years, we brought back to life.
Oh, wonderful.
Mezzanine floors, just really stylish, individual, unique apartments. So not every single one was different.
And was the property listed? Was it in a conservation area?
It wasn't listed because previously in the 80s, it was owned by the local council.
Okay.
There was cause for it to become a listed building because it was so important. But they very quickly put in plastic windows. So
what a nightmare.
Yeah, what a nightmare that was. It was no longer listed. And then obviously at the time it was run as an art centre. But then they withdrew funding to running it as an art centre. So it was derelict for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
So I actually started the process of trying to buy it in 2004. I finally got the keys in 2007.
Wow.
So there was
You had to fight for it.
I've had to fight all the way along for this building.
So you can imagine it was quite a task.
So emoji,
Emotionally driven.
Yes.
But we just wanted to make Sally aware that there is other opportunities there, and that's one of the big things about Property Mentors. It's showing that there is alternatives. There are alternatives. And so I think we came up with some ideas.
And building a pipeline as well. You know, so if you did build that out or whatever you were to do with it, there's other deals to do after in the future. Developers need to build a development pipeline.
But just talk very briefly about what the development potential that you had in mind when we met you, as in just sticking with that, and maybe Scott can have a thought about that and what his thoughts are on that.
Analyse the numbers. For me, it's all about the numbers. So it's a lovely building. We love all the passion. But how much money was it going to make? I want to hear from Scott as my financial guru over here to my right. How much money is it going to make? Is it fundable by a lender? And then we'll go on to look at the other deals we presented in a similar fashion and see which one stacks up on the numbers the best.
So planning permission for 6 apartments, and because there was all unique, resale values were quite high for that particular area. I owed 200,000 on that building.
On a commercial mortgage?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in terms of the value of it, the GDV was expected, I think, at 2.4, I believe. 2.4.
I think it was 2.4 to 2.8 was the range we discussed when we were on site.
But what I hoped to have done was develop, hold on to them and rent them out, because there was huge demand in that area for that. So we would get quite a high rental income per month for that. Although we had a permission for 6 apartments, one of the apartments actually was a 3-bed, which was a bit of a nonsense actually, because it was huge and it wasn't particularly in demand really for what it was. So that could have easily been split to create a 7th apartment, but that was something that we would be looking into.
So if I could, do you mind me commenting on that? I mean, this is part of the problem sometimes with the UK planning process. They'll demand a certain mix of apartments, a certain type, and all of these, bits of red tape can really throttle sometimes what the market actually needs and what's viable for developers to build. Because it would have been an even more viable site if you had been able to get another 1 or 2 apartments out of this site, slightly smaller. And actually, as we move into an era where there's massive demand for more affordable, smaller properties, the councils still seem to be 20 years behind and wanting big 3-bed flats, which, who lives in a 3-bed flat? If you can afford a 3-bed flat, you're going to buy a small 2 or 3-bed house for your family.
With a garden.
With a garden.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
It was a slightly compromised layout based on the planning.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we always look at is how liquid a market is the end product going into. And that's really important, whether it is for sale or for rental, there's got to be demand for what you're trying to create.
So what was your requirement from somebody like Scott? Presumably you needed finance to make this happen.
Yeah.
What were you looking for? And big question is, would Scott have given it to you?
What sort of build costs?
Well, obviously
probably?
Scott would have lent me the money, I'm sure.
Mates
because it made perfect sense to me. But so for us, I was looking for the development finance.
Yeah.
So I had to pay off the existing loan amount that I had of 200,000.
Yeah.
And then I would have had to spend 8 to $1 million to do it.
Yeah.
And bring in an experienced team.
Yeah.
I understood the creative process of it.
Yeah.
I knew every inch of that building.
Sure you did.
I knew exactly how it would look, feel and smell at the end.
Yes.
So I knew my market.
Yeah.
I knew who I was appealing to.
Yes.
Right sizes.
Yeah.
People that didn't want to have the big houses or the gardens, because we were surrounded by parkland.
Fabulous.
We were walking distance to the main town centre, shuttle buses to the industrial estate, 2-minute walk across the beautiful park, and then you could get to the train station.
Yeah.
Half an hour into London.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
transport
tick,
links are very, very important, particularly on rental properties.
Yeah, it was great. It was an absolute peach.
Yeah.
And I knew that. And I believed in the scheme. So I was looking forward to redeem the existing loan and then development finance.
Yeah, understood. And was this your first project, Sally?
On this scale, I've done smaller schemes.
What have you done?
So I converted knocked down bungalows and created beautiful homes with that. Okay. I've been employed by a nightclub to redevelop and redesign the space. So I managed to triple their income, their revenue, just by basic space planning. I just love interior.
Yeah.
I like how a space can make you feel.
Yeah.
So I'm not a professional interior designer. I'm not an architect.
Yeah.
But I know what works and what doesn't.
Okay.
So that's my sort of thing. And I've been in business. Yeah, it's my passion. And my background is performing arts. So, of course, I'm all smoke and mirrors. So I can make anything look amazing
I love that.
on a budget.
Yeah.
So
I need a bit of smoke and mirrors sometimes in the morning.
But obviously, looking at the property,
Yes.
you know, it's quite a complex commercial to resi conversion. I know you've got a shell there with beautiful high ceilings and a fabulous ballroom, but it's not that straightforward
No,
to
quite complex.
you know, putting
New
mezzanine floors in and,
yeah.
and insulation and what have you.
Funny you say that. It was not overwhelming for me. I think
Okay.
because that building was mine,
Yeah.
and I was part of every single process with the planning, you know, the architect really squeezing every last drop out of the integrity of the building and how we make it work. So no, actually, as providing you get the right people, and they were going to put the steels in, it's like a Meccano set, it's not
Yeah.
that complicated,
Yeah.
with the right people.
Okay.
So actually it didn't feel complex.
Okay.
Because I knew that building. If I'd gone to do one of the other projects, I would probably be a bit more fearful because I didn't know them.
So you mentioned before.
That's a fair point, actually, and interesting to appreciate how hard our job was, wasn't it, to present something that might tempt Sally away. So we, you know, obviously yours was a
Lovely.
great potential doing that because it was quite simple. Mine was maybe a little bit less glamorous.
I think we're underhanded nothing. But we don't know what happened, so don't give the game away.
I'm not at all.
So I know one of the big things about Roma Finance is you back people, not just projects.
Yes.
And so is Sally the kind of person, because she strikes me, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but exactly the kind of person you would want, apart from the experience.
I think that you know, we back people to deliver projects successfully. Okay, and we look to see whether a project is within somebody's skill set. And if it's not within their skill set, then how are they enhancing their power team, and how are they incentivizing their power team, and how are they motivating, and how are the power team on the hook as well in order to deliver a project successful?ly. Let me just wind back if I can, because there's some numbers that I don't quite understand. You mentioned when you were talking that the rental yields of the properties would be very good, but you didn't say what rental you'd be able to get on the 6 apartments in total when they were finished.
So when I spoke to agents regarding the rentals, because it was unique, they were suggesting in the region between £10,000 to £12,000 a month.
Okay.
So in my mind, I think 10.
I agree. Okay, so £120,000 a year, assuming they're all fully occupied. And what was your GDV?
The GDV was between 2.4 and 2.8.
Okay, so let's say just 2.4 for a second. Okay,
Yeah.
so you've got £120,000 a year income on a GDV of 2.4 million, which is a yield of 5%. Okay, given where base rates have been, you can get 5%. Putting your money into a bank without risk. So you just need to bear in mind that when we're talking about numbers, actually commercially it's got to make sense as well. And you know, arguably, where if the rental yield is only 5%, you can get 5% in a bank. There is limited capital growth because the market is quite toppy. In theory, as house prices have risen since 2010, 2011. Commercially, what made you want to do this, particularly rental properties?
It was a long-term investment.
Okay.
And also, I'd have an asset that I could trade against to go on and do other lovely things. So money makes money, right? And the experience I would have got from this, it would have been a kind of a 14-month, 18-month period of time to do it all. So actually, the skills that I would have learnt would have been invaluable.
Okay.
And then
so you were earning and learning, rather than just sticking your money in a bank, which is a bit boring.
100%.
So am I sensing a sort of a note of caution in your mind on this one?
Yeah. So if we kind of take it back, so you've got a property that could be worth 2.4 to 2.8 million. It would cost £1 million to do the conversion works. It was owned with a relatively small loan against it of £200,000. So numbers-wise, it works with some good upside. Okay, and you can get the lending on it in order to do the conversion. But it's not a simple project. It's complex. And commercial to resi conversions, or any type of conversion of existing asset, tends to be more complicated, because even though you know the building, once you start knocking it about, there are things that you didn't know that you find out about a building, which only go and serve to increase the costs and complications. And we've seen projects where, and look, it's not as beautiful as a dance studio, kind of old mill buildings, where once you start knocking it about, the amount of steel that gets required, materially increases the cost of the project.
I'll put you on the spot. Are you going to lend Sally the money?
I would need to look at who else is engaged in the project and how they are incentivized and how you've made them important to the project so that they can't walk away and screw it up.
So a good consultants team or a JV partner would be two solutions to that, potentially, for experience.
But it's really great to hear it from the other side, if you like. I'm drawn, because I'm the heart guy, I suppose the numbers guy, to your enthusiasm, and I'm a little. But I think to hear it analysed in quite a cold, in a good way kind of way, is really important.
Cold-heartedness.
No, I wouldn't say that cold. You know what I mean? It's not cold as in you're
joking.
cold. You're just looking at the numbers, and I think Scott is as well.
You have to look
You
at
have
both.
to. But I think it's really important because that enthusiasm will only get you so far.
I think this is a challenging project to fund for somebody who doesn't have the experience of doing a more simple commercial to resi conversion that's on their own, okay, without the team that's there having can provide the experience and consultancy, and also have got your back, okay, and have also got the lenders back as well in making sure there's a positive outcome on something like this.
Okay, that's good to hear. Let's move on to where we took Sally, and we tried to, obviously on Mentors, bring options to you or the people we're mentoring to show that there are other options out there, just to broaden the mind. And they may well not tick a box, they may well not float a boat, but hopefully they just show that there is, there is other fish in the sea, so to speak. So let's start with the one that I took you to, okay? Just remind ourselves what that was. Good. So this is alternative number one. In 1999, it was granted planning permission for demolition and the construction of 3 houses. Okay, now look around. There's some really nice houses around here. So you're looking at a high-end residential area and the option for 3 houses. So as a potential development opportunity, forget what it looks like now, because you're going to knock it down. So there you go. I liked it. It was quirky, but
beautiful architectural design.
Okay, so it wasn't. It wasn't.
I
fell
in love with it.
Careful what you say here, because yours is coming in a minute. Remember, and yours talk about pot calling the kettle black. People in glass houses and all that kind of stuff. But anyway,
so church was pretty much glass windows all round.
Whatever. Anyway, so Sally, you were, remind us. Yeah, you were okay with it. Yeah. You saw the potential. Scott, have you had a chance to think about this one, and how does this fit from a lender's point of view? Yeah.
So Martin, just talk me through the numbers if you can on the one that you presented to Sally.
Okay. So it was. As you'll know, it's a former church, the least church-like looking church I think I've ever seen.
It wasn't a very church-looking church.
It was more like a church hall,
prefabricated church.
Prefabricated church.
An asset of commercial. An asset of community value.
It was not an asset of community value, but yes, it was when it was operational.
Yeah.
And you know what? I genuinely always get quite sad when these kind of places close down, because it was a community facility, but it did. The positives were it's going to be knocked down anyway. So it was the location, it was the levelness of the site, it was the existence of utilities, and it was the fact that it already had planning permission, which as we all know,
family homes
is so much part of the pain of doing any development project. So it was like on a plate in some ways. So the purchase price was 750,000.
Yeah.
So we think there was a bit of flexibility on that, but let's see if you got actual money on the table. It's always going to come down, isn't it? A bit. Estimated GDV about 2.4 million.
Okay.
Based on and what sounds like a relatively low build costs of 750,000.
Yeah.
But I think that is realistic given the site.
Okay.
So demolition wouldn't be that expensive.
Yeah.
Because it's basically a prefabricated structure. Not very much likelihood of contamination. So reasonable profit in there with those 3 properties. So to my mind, it was a bit of a no-brainer. But that's it in a nutshell. I'm bound to say that, aren't I?
Yeah, that's fine. I think when you're doing a new build, the biggest risk is before you come out of the ground. Okay, so here you've got a flat site where there's no contamination, where the services are easy to connect to. Okay, and you've got a building that doesn't really cost an awful lot to demolish because it's effectively a prefabricated structure, and so that.
Don't make him feel better. Don't big it up too much, Scott.
From a
play it down a bit. He's going to get a.
So from a. I can be quite controversial on this show, can't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You can wind both of us up in our own way.
So I've got to be honest. I like the notion of keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with effectively a demolishing of a simple building on a flat site, services connected, and they are nice properties, family homes in a residential area being created, and there's not much issues with the ground. This is a project that is a backable project, subject to obviously the team that's around you.
And so, why would Sally's, with respect, limited experience be less important in this case?
Because let's just put it around a different way. Let's say that on the previous project that the end value was 2.4 million. Okay, and just for argument's sake, let's say that that Sally was able to sell that building for a third of its end value with the planning consent that you'd put in place. Okay, so you might have got £800,000 for that property. Once you paid off the loan of 200, you could have put £600,000 of cash into this purchase. Okay, so again, it's a total cost of $750 for the build, $750 for the purchase. That's 1.5 million. You would only have had to borrowed $900,000 for this project. Okay, and the skin in the game means that from a lender's perspective, it's fairly de-risked. It's a simple site. We've talked about all of that already, and so this is a more attractive project because of its simplicity.
Okay.
So it's important advice, right, for people watching the show. Simplicity from a lender's perspective.
Yeah.
They like that.
Yeah.
So don't think you have to find a difficult project to make the money.
No.
Find something that's easy.
What do you think about what you've heard?
I understand your rationale because you're a money man. But there is something surely to be said by something that inspires you, no?
There is something to be said by something that inspires you. Absolutely right.
Because simple doesn't always equate to being successful.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we need to think a little bit beyond the boxes that we are put in. And rightly or wrongly, and listen, I'm not saying that this has necessarily worked out for me. However, I will always go with something that inspires me over something that necessarily works on that bottom line.
And the piece
that sweet spot I need to find.
And that's fine. But the piece that you've got to remember is that I would look at this in a cold-hearted way, okay, about de-risking my position as a lender, because don't forget that my position as a lender, my success moment is aligned with your success moment.
Of course.
And therefore, the more simple the project, the more realistic the success moment and how quickly that can happen for everybody's benefit. Now, once you've made the money on this one, okay, you then can, with earning and learning, which I love that phrase, okay, earning and learning on something simple means that, because there'll still be mistakes that get made even on a simple project, you then increase the complexity as you're going on, and not biting off more than you can chew and running before you can walk, I think are really important when it comes to property.
They are. However, if I'd followed that blueprint, I wouldn't have brought that property that was derelict from the council, that I was a complete unknown.
Yes.
Every single person in a suit told me not to buy it. I got it for 170.
Yeah.
So, and then for the duration of the time that I had it, we were extremely successful. So we ran a very profitable company, multiple companies, and multiple companies were launched there.
Yeah.
So I understand. However, everybody told me not to buy it. I did. And we're now looking at figures. I mean, it blows my mind. We're looking at figures of 2.4, 2.8. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous.
Did anybody warn you off
crazy.
doing this project on the dance hall, rather than buying it and using it in a dance hall in the way that you did? Which, by the way, fantastic. All credit to you for the way that you've restored that building and used it commercially, to create something which is obviously incredibly fabulous. That for 15, 20, provided you with a fulfilling a passion.
Well, yeah, and more than that.
And
like,
It's two different things.
But
it's two different things. I mean, one thing is, running a business from within a property, and it's another thing completely doing a complex property development and commercial to resi conversion where it's something that's new to you.
I think it seemed far riskier in 2007, and as we know, that wasn't a great year, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Business?
Absolutely. I remember that year.
Right?
I think we all do.
So I think, back at that time, and bearing in mind, I was a dance teacher, so even less knowledge. I was just a dance teacher that had this dream. It's going to be a studio. You imagine going in front of banks and saying, I just think everyone got mortgages. And I had to go and present my case. But the building was derelict. So it was far more of a challenge back then because there was far more unknowns. And I had no money to do it. So that was on a wing and a prayer. So for me, this actually is not complicated. This was very simple because I'd learned and I've prospered in the time that I did the renovation project back in 2007 on no money, ran successful companies from it, then did the planning, was heavily involved. So yes, I
like the debate, guys. I like the
sorry,
debate. I think what I'd like to add to this is that with us as developers, and we're all developers, the three of us essentially, we have to make an informed judgment, and we have to have passion for what we're doing. This is a business. It's not just as simple. No, it's not just as simple as the numbers, Scott.
But let me ask you a question. If this was your first project, would you have done this as your first project?
No.
I think I'd have to say no.
So, okay, and that's the point that I'm getting to. So irrespective of the passion, someone who's been in property development for 15 years, and obviously Martin, you've been involved in property for a very long time. Would this have been your first project? No.
No chance.
I think that, but the balance as developers, we want to get out of.
But I can understand Sally's point,
and I agree.
100%.
We want to enjoy
and probably,
it's a career.
if I'm honest about, probably in my early days, I probably would have done exactly what I've done. I don't care. This is an amazing building. I'm going to do it. I just trust it. It's going to be fine. Everything will be fine. Because that is sort of my personality and your personality. So it's an interesting marrying.
It's got to be a balance, isn't it?
There has got to be a balance.
It's a balance.
And I guess, Scott, you've got a really important role in just reining in that childish enthusiasm into some kind of financial reality. But at the end of the day, you're going to not give the money, aren't you? I mean, that's what is going to happen. Should we move on? That's really interesting.
Well, I think it's about time for a proper deal that does actually make money. I'm sure Scott's going to back me. Scott, this
wouldn't happen to be your deal, would it, Nicholas?
That's why we're sitting together, because clearly he's going to back my deal, not any other whimsical.
So we got in Nick's rust bucket of a so-called vehicle
with a Porsche engine.
Patina. And I can't remember. Did it break down on this particular journey?
No, this one it was fine.
We were lucky, weren't we? So we trundled to, I think, probably a place that I wouldn't necessarily. Of course, we can remember. I can just remember driving. I don't want to dish any other towns which look like an industrial estate gone horribly wrong with a McDonald's that doesn't have a bin outside it. But that was kind of and the multiple roundabouts. So on the face of it, on arriving at your chosen
well-connected location.
On the choice, we went to a place, and let's just remind ourselves how bad it was. Wow.
Try to contain your excitement, Sally.
I'm really trying hard.
Try to contain your excitement. The best is yet to come. This is where the interesting bit comes. You need to visualise. Visualisation. Think, when we're doing our mindset techniques, Sally, for success. Visualise this.
Yeah.
The plot actually extends all the way out to this line.
Okay.
So there's a bit of hidden meterage here.
Yep.
It's obviously a knockdown and rebuild job. We're not going to try and convert this ugly, dangerous, asbestos-ridden building. And we're not going to be building luxury apartments for the city boys, to travel around to London from. Although it is a great location for that. We're going to be building build-to-rent apartments.
Okay.
Now, in this block, I reckon, having sketched it out, we could get 5 apartments and a commercial unit. 2 on the first floor, 2 on the second floor, and 1 on the ground floor. And a commercial unit at the front.
So there you go.
Beautiful. I think
How can you defend yourself?
potential. I'm trying to find another word other than potential.
Let's remind ourselves what Sally's reaction was.
Try and contain your excitement again, Sally.
I mean, I'm a creative, and even I struggled to grasp it. But I mean, potential is
Yes.
the word. I think
Potential to make some money.
we kept using that, and I think and you're right. It made, from what you were saying, it made sense on paper. Again, this is what I'm saying. It made but did it light me up? No. Is it somewhere I'd want to live? No. So all of these things, and I'm a person and other people will feel the same, right?
But the trouble is, I do hear this from people from time to time. You can't buy with your heart all the time. As an investor, you can't necessarily, leading on from the conversation
depends
before,
on your strategy.
buy every site as a passion project. It's got to be a balance. So
Explain
for
the
that
numbers to Scott.
One deal was about making money.
So talk through the numbers to Scott.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was a purchase price of 250,000.
Yep.
There was obviously some potential competition from the neighbours there, the adjacent site. So there was some marriage value that they could attribute, which would allow them to possibly bid.
So it was worth
stronger
more
than
to
that.
them than anybody else.
Well, not necessarily, because the scheme that we were going to put together was a GDV of around 2 million, and that's made up of about 300 to 350,000 pounds per flat.
Yeah.
And some commercial underneath. So it's a mixed-use scheme.
Yeah.
We were going to rent those out probably on some sort of multi-letter and HMO above to maximise the income.
Yeah.
So I think we could bid strongly.
Yeah.
But as a residential flat scheme, you'd probably struggle to make money if you're going to sell those flats off. So it was very much a build-to-rent scheme.
And was it close to infrastructure, roads,
Extremely
railways?
close to infrastructure.
Way too close.
3 metres away from a
Roundabout.
Okay, so noise would not have been an issue at all.
That'd been fine. triple glazing throughout.
And was it near any other industrial buildings or properties?
Yes,
surrounded by them.
It can often be a challenge to
that
get people
noise?
to live in a
That noise when
If you wanna
somebody's
get your
taking
cars-
off. I know that, but when somebody's taking off a car tyre and they use one of those pneumatic
Drills.
impact
Yep.
nut removal things.
Yeah.
That noise happened quite a lot. And there's no amount of triple glazing that get rid of
So,
that.
you've got the benefit of getting your tyres changed really conveniently to one side, and the other side was just a small parade of shops with flats above. So we were going to extend the parade of shops with some commercial with flats above.
Okay.
So I'm not suggesting you would want to live there. Right, so it's not a living home. We're not looking for this for home. We're looking for this for affordable, rentable accommodation, probably for young professionals.
Okay.
Possibly even a social housing use at some point. So
Okay.
it was a sort of multi-let, low-end rental that makes good money.
What were the rents possible on these 5 flats and the commercial unit on completion?
Right, so I'm less sure on the commercial. I don't do a lot of commercial, but I can guesstimate that in a moment. But for the 5 flats, we were then going to onward HMO those into, say, small three-bed HMOs as a minimum, maybe 4. There's licensing requirements, there's all sorts of things. This was a full planning site, so assuming that we weren't conditioned not to turn these into HMOs in the future, we would be able to do that.
Okay.
I'd estimate we could have got 15 rooms in total.
Okay.
And each of those rooms would have rented for around about £600 a month.
So 600 times 15 is 1 second,
Glad he's doing
6,000,
this
9,000. 9,000
Yeah, so about £9,000 per month
per 9k per month.
in rental income on
Okay.
the flats.
Times by 12 is 70. It's 108,000 a year with a GDV of plus your commercial. And let's say your commercial was 25 grand a year.
25 grand a year would be
Yeah.
10%
So 25 grand a year, so it's 133k, which gives you a yield of actually a better yield than was on the first project.
Of course there is.
Okay, of about, if my maths is right, around about 6 or 7%.
Yeah, I think it's a better yield than Martin's deal as well.
But Martin's property is more about the sale.
The sale.
I don't think Martin was a rental.
No, so it is two options, right? It's the resale option or the rental.
The rental.
Keep rental and refinance.
Yeah.
So really, in terms of fundability, would you fund the development to build it, and would you fund a term loan once let at the end to keep it?
I think one of the things you've got to think about is the location, okay? And what you don't know is what's underneath the ground at this particular site.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Going back to my point around keep it simple, stupid. Not only that, but if you've got the garage next door that actually wanted to buy it and you've pipped them to the post, okay, then actually you've got a neighbour who is not so friendly potentially
Good
as
point.
well, which
Yep.
also brings its challenges.
Yeah.
So
Sally knows all about that.
yeah, and it's really important that anything that you do, there's got to be, you want to have the neighbours on side, because you don't want them to be obstructive in what you're trying to do.
The planning process as well, right? So
absolutely.
It is no, I accept that. Absolutely.
So on that basis, Martin, I think the keep it simple option of your project wins it for me.
Yeah.
You've got one vote already.
Yeah, well done. To be fair, I think the one you showed us was the worst of all the ones in all.
Thanks very much.
It was. Of all the mentors programs we've done so far, that was the worst.
It can't even be a project of passion.
In the first episode, I was setting the bar low,
really
so
low.
only improve.
Yeah, and it probably had contamination. Did you mention contamination?
A few times. Yeah.
You
mentioned it again.
alluded to it.
And what about the relationship with the neighbours?
Yeah. And the noise from the
complaints.
pneumatic drilly things.
Yeah.
So, Sally, does that just back up what you felt and we felt?
I liked yours.
Yes.
I preferred yours. Nick, I
forgive you.
couldn't get on board with that. But clearly I didn't listen to your advice.
So no, we now need to know exactly this. So time moves on. Here we are, years on from this. What happened when we left?
Well, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Sadly, what happened was, and actually probably underpins what you've said, that you need to bring people on board, because my lack of experience, so-called lack of experience, what happened was people then said, Sally, you can't possibly do this on your own. You need to do this. You need someone who's experienced. So I followed that advice and I took on a JV partner because he had experience, and I created my power team around me of, legals and consultants. Because it was very clear that there's this misconception that passion equals stupidity, and enthusiasm is not backed up with knowledge. So I thought, well, I'll learn here, and I will bring on people that are experts who can make this deal happen. But sadly, what happened with that JV project, that JV venture, the joint venture, was he was meant to project manage it. He was the PG on the development.
Personal guarantee.
Yeah, the personal guarantor, yeah.
Which is what a bank would have needed in a partner to give that experience to build it.
So we cleared my outstanding loan of 200,000 with
Who cleared that? He cleared that.
As part of the deal, yes.
Yes.
So it was, so in effect, yes.
Did he put £200,000 into your lawyer's bank account?
He did, but that was funded, so it wasn't his own money.
Wow.
So that was funded.
So his skin. So this is, for me, this is all about skin in the game. So whilst there is upside gain, what downside pain is there for him, for you bringing him into the project? So if if it was a JV, then it would have been a 50-50 split of the upside. What downside risk did that JV partner face?
So very much because he took the PG, he was going to fund and organise the funding to do the development finance, even though we were 50-50 of the company.
Yes.
So we set up a company to do the construction. He was the main contractor. as well, and he would be taking a fixed fee also to be the PM.
Yeah.
Because based on everybody around the table with, Sally, you've not done a scheme like this before, you need experts. It seemed justifiable to bring someone on board to do that. And, you know, we did our due diligence. We invested in the proper legal channels, and we did everything that textbook-wise tells you to do.
Yes.
Sadly,
Yes.
it was quite obvious quite shortly into the project that work wasn't progressing.
Yeah.
He wasn't really in attendance on site. He was
Yeah.
utterly charming.
Yes.
Spoke a good game.
Yes.
But unfortunately, because it was deemed that he was sort of running the project,
Yes.
and I was just a shareholder.
So you weren't a director
I wasn't
of
a
that JV
director.
company?
No.
Wow.
That was advised, again, you
Yes.
know, invested in expert opinion.
Yes.
So then, so I took as a shareholder role, but obviously I was very invested because I
Yeah,
wanted the project to
course.
work, because it's
Yeah.
a win-win.
Yep.
And I knew that at the end of, on the completion of the apartments, I would get the remainder of my
Yes.
money for him
Yes.
to come have a seat at my table.
Yes.
I'd get the remainder of that, and then 50% of the uplift of the
Okay.
values. So that's, but our strategy at the beginning was always to rent them out. We were both in agreement of that at the beginning.
Yep.
As time wore on, he started to drop sort of conversations in
Yes.
of, well, I think I might sell. Okay, well, we need to discuss that and look at the figures.
Yes.
And bring in the team and everything else.
Yeah.
But
So if I can,
of course.
so on day one, you had a property that was worth about £800,000 with planning consent.
Yeah.
And you owed 200. So
Yeah.
the value that you had in that property
Yeah.
was about £600,000, give or take.
Yes.
That person coming in, not even with his own money, paid off the £200,000 loan on it. And so on day one, he had upside gain of £300,000. And you had downside pain of £300,000 because the equity in the property was then split 50-50 because that was the ownership of the company, right?
Yeah.
So going back to what I was saying, I know you talked about a PG, but what assets did he have to support that PG that made you feel comfortable that he was on the hook for something should it go wrong, that he was motivated, incentivized to deliver on that project?
So we, this is a difficult one to answer really, because it was all done via our lawyers, you know,
Yes.
and around the table and everything else. So, and the fact that he had a very good broker that sort of structured the deal for him. And he was an ex-solicitor as well, so he
Wow.
knew both sides of,
Okay.
the thing. So
Was he? The broker or the JV
the
partner?
broker.
Oh, the broker was an
The
ex-lawyer.
broker, yeah.
Ah,
So
okay.
he could see both sides, you know, the legalities of it and, you know,
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
structure it.
Yeah.
And I'm sat at a table with 6 men that they're being paid for their expert opinion and advice.
Yes.
So I am being guided by said experts.
Yeah.
This is perhaps why I'm a little triggered when you say enthusiasm, passion are all seen as a negative, when actually that's all well and good, but so-called experts don't always get it right.
So
either.
and that's going back to what I was saying, is that going with your gut.
My gut,
Okay, is really, really important. So things can work on a piece of paper, they can work on a spreadsheet, okay? And that's one thing. It's another thing entirely, actually, does this feel right or does
Yeah.
it not feel right?
yeah, thank you. And you're exactly right. And my biggest regret is I didn't listen to my instinct. And my
Yeah.
instinct was I will just assemble the right team, an
Absolutely.
experienced construction team. I had already a property mentor
Yes.
that I could, you know, speak to and be guided
Yeah.
by.
Yeah.
So therefore it was easy. So therefore my gut
Yes.
was, Sally, suck it up, get on with it. Yes, it's going to be challenging.
Well, you trusted him as well, and it's not a bad thing to trust people.
Exactly, but my
foremost.
instinct was I should have done it. I shouldn't actually have gone into a JV. It didn't feel right, but I
Yeah.
was being seduced by expert opinion.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think in that, and I think in that moment, in Sally's defence, not that anyone's attacking her, but somebody offering a PG, I don't know if your first instinct is to check out their financial status. I don't know. You would just assume, presumably he was fairly well-to-do, had his own house, turned up in a nice car, well-dressed, building company.
Yes.
So you assume that he's going to be good for something and has something to lose, which is what PGs are all about.
And I think that you've made the point beautifully, which is, you've got to check whether somebody has something to lose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And if we fast forward to actually, there is a nice car. Is it owned or is it rented? The nice house, is it owned or is it rented?
I'd say it's really difficult though in these instances, on a not a practical point of view, but if I'm trying to build a relationship with you, and you say to me, I'll give a PG, and I say, you don't mind if I just check out all your finances, do you? I mean,
sometimes you've got to ask those difficult questions.
Well, I know, but I can understand why it is a difficult question. It's maybe some people don't ask because it's almost a little bit too personal.
So let me ask you a different question. Let me ask you a different question, which is...
I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I'm saying
it's
the
easy
practicalities of doing
listen, I do
are
this,
quite hard.
So I
easy
do
for
this.
Scott to ask
I do
it.
this for a living.
It's not easy for
I
Sam
do this
to
for a living,
ask
and I appreciate that someone who doesn't do it for a living, it's a difficult conversation because it's not where your comfort zone is, and often people want to operate within the sphere that they feel comfortable, and so you've got to step outside your comfort zone to ask the difficult questions.
Yeah, of course.
It's a bit like, when you marry somebody, okay, you are marrying the person and the package, not just the person.
Right.
Okay, and business is no different.
Yeah, that's got so many levels.
Deep, isn't it?
That's deep.
It's a bit like...
Your wife will love that comment.
But it's true. It's true. You've got to look at it, okay, that it's a partnership, and business is all about relationships.
Sally's would say, what about loving them? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
hearts
Their
all over the
values,
place.
their
the
quality.
person and the package. Hey,
But
darling,
it's all
here's...
about the package, apparently. So
Anyway,
thank
no,
you for
but
that.
we get it. No. But I think what you said, which I think is really important, is let somebody else ask the question.
But
Yes.
also, don't...
That's a really good point.
It's going
That's a
to
really
be
good point.
Yes.
too difficult for me
That's a really
to
good
ask
point.
you.
That's a
but
really
Nick
good
could
point.
ask you as my advisor.
You know what? But that is exactly right. So if you don't feel comfortable asking those questions, get somebody else to ask them on your behalf.
Yeah.
And dig a bit deeper.
And your solicitor
Scratch-
or somebody
scratch beneath the
protecting
surface.
your...
Well, she had a solicitor,
So
that's
there
the
you are. So
problem
don't
here.
forget,
This is part of
remember.
the
We
problem.
don't know what happened because I think Sally needs to explain what actually happened
Yes.
because we're assuming it all went wrong. Did it go wrong?
Well, it did go wrong. Yes, in a nutshell, yes. I mean, I lost a million.
How badly?
Well, I've lost £1 million, and to the point where the
Wow.
bank. What happened was he used the funds. It didn't equate to the work that was actually valued, but he managed to draw down the facility.
How on earth did he manage to do that
Well,
without
again,
having done the work?
This is what I'm saying about the safeguarding levels. Even from the very beginning, he came. He had a broker who'd already had approval of a loan.
Yes.
So the bank, the lender, would have done their due diligence.
You'd hope so.
You would hope so, but it was a reputable lender. It actually was the same lender that I had originally, and I had faith in them. They was a good. I've never had a problem with them. They were a good lender. So that was one layer. I also paid a significant amount of money to have legal advice.
Yes.
I had independent financiers look at the deal.
Yes.
I had the best architects and consultants. So there was lots of fees that I was shelling out to do the due diligence at that level.
Yeah.
So it's not even about asking the question. I'm employing people to do the job and ask the question.
But if I can, though, he was the sole director of the company
Yes.
on an asset that you owned previously.
Yes.
And because you were not a director, he was authorised to go and make decisions on behalf of the business that you were not in control of.
Well, he had certain roles he has to fulfill as a director, but the way that we'd structured the contract, obviously there were 50-50 shareholders,
Yes.
so there were certain things he always should have,
Yes.
which he didn't deliver. He had to provide financial information to me ongoing throughout. So there was, we put in...
You had protection.
We
contractual
Sounds like
protection.
Sally went a bit above and beyond to try
Yes.
and protect herself here. This is a terrible story.
One thing I would say is that you can't protect yourself from crooks. Sometimes.
But effectively, what you'd done there was you'd lost control.
How do you do that to
You'd
the
lost
level?
control of a company that owned an asset that was really yours.
Yes, but I suppose I lost. What happened was it was very easy to ring fence me. So then I was the cause of You know, when I would raise concerns or I would go on site and nothing had been done, and the team were disgruntled about the way it was being managed, and they didn't even have plans, or there was a problem, or there was issues with asbestos that no one was told about, and all things like this. There was a whole catalogue of things shocking, even down to having, you know, there was no health and safety induction for the team. There was no welfare facilities. All things that are so against how I run things.
Yeah.
You've got legal obligations as a
Absolutely.
And,
constructor to do those things.
It's so easy to know what those rules and regs are. I mean, that doesn't take an expert. It's idiots proof how to run a site.
So the monitoring surveyor, did they not look at all the CDM and F12?
Yeah, I mean, but again, that wasn't even...
Basically, all the way in which the site and the people on the site are looked after, because there's regulations that sit around there.
Yes.
There's CDM regulations and what's called F12 as well.
So even with that wasn't even present on site. And when they eventually did put that up...
And he still got the drawdowns.
Even when they did put it up, they put the wrong address on there, and they'd copied another document from another site that was in Milton Keynes, and we was in Hemel Hempstead. So again, and I was and I'm reporting this back, but everyone was like, "Sally, you're too emotional. Stay in your lane." Wow. So this is why you know it's difficult, because
it's terrible. So bring us right up to date then. What's happened?
So what happened was
you lost £1 million. What's happened to the property?
Sadly, what happened? The bank. He tried to force me to sign to take a lend of 1.4 million. I said no, because he lied, and I just wouldn't do it.
Dig yourself deeper in.
Exactly, so I wouldn't do that. Again, under much criticism, the experts in the suits all told me that I should suck it up and give him a chance to finish the scheme. But he'd actually only spent 180 on the scheme and took a whole facility, and then wanted to go additional to finish it. So who's right, who's wrong? So
well, a lot of people would have put good money after bad, I have to say. But so you probably made you definitely made the right decision.
Well, I followed my instinct, because my instinct was right, and I was gaslit all the way through, you see. So I knew that. So I was to be damned. I had an opportunity to just cut the chain, really. So I then tried to refinance it, but because I'm not stupid, looking at the commercial and the facts and figures, because of the money that it needed. It was different when I owned the building and only had 200 grand, but it made sense. Yeah. I only had 200,000, that's nothing.
Became unviable.
It was no longer viable on paper.
Yes.
Although it was a project that it was, would have come right in the end.
Yes.
But to ask an external investor to come and support the scheme, I couldn't, with all faith, put my name to it, because I can back myself.
Yes.
But,
And also the debts by that time presumably had spiralled to make the project
exactly. So then the bank, we'd various different things, and then he then just sort of disappeared really from communications.
Yes.
And then the bank took it foreclosed, and they took it to auction. I wasn't told it went to auction, so I didn't even have an opportunity to buy it back. No one informed me.
So there would have been an LPA receiver, presumably, that effectively is instructed by the lender, but acts on behalf of the borrower in order to protect the equity that the borrower has in the property. That's the idea behind it. So there's an obligation there.
Yeah.
So
I'm just kind of laying that out there, that there is an obligation to protect the equity that the borrower's got in the property.
So can I summarise?
If you can.
You had a property you absolutely loved.
Life's work.
Yeah. You had very little debt on it.
200,000.
And you listened to other people's advice to go and surround yourself by people who are supposed to know what they're doing.
They're experts.
Because they are. To do a joint venture project to redevelop this place.
Because they've got experience.
That went completely and utterly nuclear rubbish.
Yeah, it did,
Which ended up in you not only losing everything, but losing, more importantly, this place that you absolutely loved, which you've now seen, have not even seen sold, has been sold without you even knowing about it, and the person who is, if you like, on the face of it, responsible for all of this, has now disappeared off the face of the planet.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Right. Hasn't gone back well, really, has it?
Yeah, it went really well. Yeah, it was a nice day. Good day at the office.
But I love the fact that you're still smiling.
Yeah, that's all credit to you.
Well, I mean, listen, you have
Cathartic
choices.
experience.
What would you say? This is really important. What would you? I don't know. The trouble I've got is I can't say Sally has done anything wrong here. I really can't say.
Maybe there's a different question, which is, looking back, if you're the advising Sally from a few years ago, what would you have done differently? What would you say to Sally now?
Follow your instinct.
Yes.
If you believe it, do it. Don't listen to them just because they're assumed to be the expert. And just because it makes sense on the bottom line doesn't mean to say the deal is right overall.
I think it's worth saying there are good experts out there.
Yeah, of course.
And you just happen to surround yourself with bad ones.
Well, but
on the face of it.
But didn't have your interests at heart.
Listen, we will never know. And so there is a level of where you have to accept that you can ruminate and drive yourself mad thinking, where did I go? And my default position as a businesswoman and an award-winning businesswoman and an ambassador for business women, my default position is always to question, what did I do? Where did I go wrong? What could I have done better? So I'm very good at appraising my own actions before anyone else. So that helps to heal from this cluster because I have to take my own accountability for my role I played. And my role was I didn't listen to my instinct. Your instinct is never wrong. And I knew I could have made that a success, but we will never know. But I believe it, and we are where we are. So I think it's that, yes, surround yourself with good people, but you can't let it taint you because, as you say, I've had wonderful people support me.
Yes.
It doesn't make me cynical or put me off. He's a con man, of course he is. Did he act with integrity? Absolutely not. No. You know, I thought I was a good judge of character. I had my solicitors and everyone else around me. He was utterly charming. So you can't let that spoil who you are. But that's what I'm saying. When we talk about passion and enthusiasm, what I'm really saying is that you act with in alignment with your integrity. And your own values. Yes. I don't bend or sway just because a spreadsheet is put in front of me and it makes sense because of the spreadsheet. Yes, I'm not stupid. We have to make sure it works, but ultimately, it's more than that. It's more than a spreadsheet.
Yeah, of course it is.
But it doesn't put me off. I mean, I'm doing a brilliant scheme now. I went off and then I took a risk. Again, everyone said to me, "Don't do it, Sally. Why? You've got this problem." And if I didn't do it, I would have not only lost my life's work, a place where I earned a significant amount of money per year, would have had this horrible experience. I would have lost out on a property that came up, which was below market value and in a beautiful location, which has got huge potential. Yeah. Is it easy? Of course not. But I don't do easy because that's not fun.
Well, before we wrap up, actually, could I thank you for your summary of
and
what
thank
you
you for
might
your
do
honesty and sharing that story with us.
Really
I was wanting to get from Scott his.
I was just about to ask, what's your top 3 financial tips of what
make sure that doesn't happen to somebody who's watching or listening.
So the first thing is that business is all about relationships. Okay, but you've also got to look at what will happen if it goes wrong. So in other words, let's say, so you'll bring this person in, they're the sole director, 50-50 JV partners. So because you only own 50% of the company, you didn't also have control of the company as the shareholder, which meant that you couldn't vote the directors out to take back control. Okay, so relationships is important. Obviously, this person was very charming and all the rest of it. But looking at each person's downside pain is really important because actually the downside pain is one of the things that often keeps people honest in something. Because if they've got something to lose, as well as something to gain, they will stay motivated and stay on it. There's nothing worse than somebody saying, "Do you know what? It's going wrong. I've got nothing to lose. Here's the keys." That's not what you are looking for in any project. So yes, the numbers work. You've got to work. Number 1. Number 2, relationships. But number 3, consideration of the what-if scenarios.
Yes.
How can I protect myself in those what-if scenarios?
It's amazing stuff.
Can I sum up my thoughts before we wrap up this episode, Martin? I think it's great to go on gut. I love Sally's passion for this project. It's got to match the numbers as well. So we've got to have a holistic view as developers. I think my only advice going forward to anyone that wants to learn from this is don't just go on gut. Don't just go on how you feel about that person. You've got to ask the difficult questions. You've got to go and ask the assets behind. Is it a leased car? Is it a bought car? What's their asset and liability sheet? I would, with anyone I work with or we work with doing mentorship and consultation, we will show our asset and liability sheet to anyone that asks. I will show every property address that I own, the debt on it and the equity on it to anyone that wants to work with me as a consultant. And I would advise anyone out there to do the same from any training courses people are going on from supposed gurus in the property world. Any mentors or consultants you're bringing on, don't be afraid to ask those questions. What have you done and what do you actually own? If you can't show me that, I don't want to work with you.
Congratulations, just from remaining positive in the most difficult
Well
situations.
Well done.
So a cautionary tale here, and not an outcome that we would have wished for. But if we can learn from it, if we can all learn from it, and maybe you watching or listening can take some advice, then hopefully that's been worthwhile. If you want our advice, Nick and I are available. We are your property mentors. You can track us down via the website, propertymentors.tv. It's surrounding the thing you're watching or listening to. We can't be surrounding it if you're listening to it, but you know what I mean. propertymentors.tv. And we'll be back with another podcast for you very soon. Goodbye.
Take care for now.